The auction pit reeked of greed, sweat, and the cold rot of a broken galaxy. Above, in the torch-lit chamber of the Jarek slave markets, dozens of alien merchants shouted over one another, their voices a cacophony of clicks, growls, and guttural barks. Laughter echoed through the rusted steel walls as the next prize was brought forth. A young alien girl, no older than 19 by Earth standards. Kira's pale blue skin seemed to glow under the harsh lights, her pink curly hair matted and dulled from months of captivity. Her fragile wrists were bound in glowing plasma cuffs that hummed with energy, and her violet eyes held a gaze that didn't fight back anymore. Hope had died in her weeks ago, burned out like the stars her captors kept her from seeing. Untouched, the auctioneer sneered, his scaled hand gripping her arm like she was meat on a hook. Pure, young, obedient, perfect for entertainment purposes. Let's start the bidding at 3,000 credits. The crowd roared with sick excitement. Creatures from across the galaxy raised their appendages, claws, and tentacles, each bid higher than the last. Kira lowered her head, hiding the tears that threatened to fall. She had learned not to cry in front of them, it only made them bid. Higher, the worst kind of laughter filled the air, the kind that doesn't see a soul, only a product. She had heard it so many times now that it had become the soundtrack of her nightmares. The last thing she expected was kindness. The last thing she dared hope for was rescue. But in the crowd, a man stood silent. Human. He wore worn combat boots that had seen 100 worlds, a sun-scarred jacket with a faded Terran Alliance patch, and eyes like thunder clouds gathering before a storm. Cold, focused, ancient scars ran along his jaw, and his hands, calloused from years of warfare, rested calmly at his sides. Captain Thorne didn't laugh. He didn't cheer. He didn't even blink as the bidding escalated around him. His gaze was fixed on the girl, but unlike the others, he wasn't seeing merchandise. He was seeing the broken spirit of someone who had once been free. 4,000, shrieked a Vorthan merchant. 5, hissed a Kepler trader. 6,000, bellowed a massive Thurian, his forearms waving enthusiastically. The auctioneer's eyes gleamed as the numbers climbed. Excellent. Do I hear 7,000 for this exquisite specimen? The bidding continued, each number another nail in Kira's coffin. She closed her eyes, trying to retreat into the small corner of her mind where memories of her homeworld still lived. Blue oceans, pink sunsets, the laughter of her younger brother. Then came a voice like steel, scraping against old armor. 10,000. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to the human who had stepped forward from the shadows. The auctioneer blinked his compound eyes, clearly taken aback by the sudden jump in price. 10,000? You must be mad, Terran. She's not worth. I said 10, Thorne growled, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. And I'll take her now. The crowd muttered, some amused by the human's boldness, others suspicious of his motives. A few laughed at what they assumed was desperation or stupidity. Well, the auctioneer recovered quickly, greed overriding his surprise. 10,000 credits it is. Go in once, go in twice. Final call sold to the Terran. Payment first, of course, but Thorne wasn't reaching for credits. He was reaching for the plasma pistol on his hip. The weapon cleared its holster in a blur of motion. The first shot struck the auctioneer square in the chest, sending him toppling backward into the crowd. The second shot hit the control panel, and sparks flew as the energy field around the auction block flickered and died. Chaos erupted. The collar round Kira's neck fell to the floor, severed in half by a precision blast. Screams filled the air as merchants fled in terror. Some tried to draw weapons, but Thorne moved like a man possessed, each shot calculated and deadly. Security breach, security breach, automated voices wailed as plasma bolts cut through the air. Kira found herself frozen in the center of the maelstrom, watching in amazement as the human carved a path of destruction through her captors. When the smoke began to clear, he was there crouched in front of her, shielding her with his body as debris rained down around them. Can you walk? He asked, his voice gentler now, though his eyes still scanned for threats. She nodded, trembling from shock and adrenaline. I think so. Then run. You're free now. She stared at him, violet eyes wide with disbelief. Why? Why would you? Behind them, the auction house burned. Alarms blared. The sounds of pursuit were growing closer, but Thorne didn't look back at the burning wreckage he had created. He just extended his hand to her and said, because someone had to be the first to say no. Kira took his hand, and together they ran toward an uncertain freedom, leaving behind the flames that marked the beginning of the end for the slave markets of Jarok. The ship Redemption hummed quietly through hyperspace, its hull scarred from countless battles. Kira sat in the co-pilot's seat, still wearing the tattered slave garments from the auction, her pale blue hands trembling as she stared at the stars streaming past. Freedom felt surreal, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. "We'll be at Haven in 6 hours, Thorne said, his voice carefully neutral. He hadn't pushed her to speak during the 3 days since their escape, understanding that trust would come slowly if at all. Kira turned to study his profile. The harsh light of hyperspace revealed more scars along his neck, and she noticed how his hands never strayed far from his weapons. Haven, neutral territory. Safe, his jaw tightened. "I've got a place there. Others like you stay until they're ready to move on." Others, the word came out as barely a whisper. "The slave trade has a lot of victims. You're not the first I've pulled out of those hellholes." He glanced at her, and for a moment, his storm-gray eyes softened. "You won't be the last." When they docked at Haven, Kira expected another sterile spaceport. Instead, Thorne led her through winding streets to a modest compound hidden in the planet's temperate forests. The building was simple but welcoming, with gardens where beings of various species worked together, their faces carrying the same haunted look she recognized in mirrors. "Welcome to the sanctuary," said a gentle voice. An elderly Altarian woman approached, her silver skin marked with ritual tattoos of healing. "I'm Healer Vessa. You're safe here, child." Kira's legs nearly gave out at the kindness in the woman's voice. Thorne caught her elbow, steadying her. "Easy," he murmured. "It's a lot to process." The first week passed in a blur of medical examinations, counseling sessions, and quiet meals. Kira learned that 37 other rescued beings called this place home, each healing at their own pace. Some had been here for months, others for years. All bore the invisible scars of their captivity. It was during the second week that Kira truly began to see Thorne. He visited daily, checking on everyone, coordinating supply runs, and planning rescue missions. She watched him work with quiet efficiency, never demanding gratitude, never drawing attention to his sacrifices. One evening, she found him in the medical bay, gritting his teeth as he dug shrapnel from a burn on his shoulder, a souvenir from their escape. His shirt was discarded, revealing a torso crisscrossed with scars that told the story of a man who had been to war many times. "Let me help," she said softly. He looked up, surprised. "You don't have to, please." She approached slowly, her pink curls catching the lamplight. "I was a medical student before they took me." Thorne hesitated, then nodded. As her gentle fingers worked to clean and dress his wound, he began to speak in a low voice. "I had a family once, a wife, a daughter." His voice cracked slightly. "They were taken by the same cartel that held you. By the time I found them." Kira's hands stilled. "I'm sorry. That's when I decided to make it my mission. Every slave I free, every operation I shut down, it's for them. And for people like you who still have a chance." She finished bandaging his shoulder, her touch lingering longer than necessary. "What if I don't want to leave?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw something kindle in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if I want to help? What if I want to be part of this?" She gestured to the sanctuary around them. "You saved me, Thorne. Now let me help you save others." For the first time since she'd met him, Captain Thorne smiled. It transformed his weathered face completely, revealing the man he might have been in another life. "It's dangerous work, Kira. Once you're in, there's no going back." She met his gaze steadily, her violet eyes no longer empty, but burning with newfound purpose. "Good. I never want to go back." Outside, the twin moons of Haven rose over the sanctuary, casting silver light through the windows. It was the first night in months that Kira fell asleep without nightmares, and the first night that Thorne slept peacefully, knowing he wasn't fighting alone anymore. 3 months later, Kira crouched beside Thorne in the shadows of a Nexus station warehouse. watching armed guards patrol the perimeter. Her pale blue skin had regained its natural luminescence, and her pink curls were now tied back in a practical braid. The scared girl from the auction pit had evolved into something harder, more determined. To guards at the main entrance, for walking the perimeter, she whispered, her fingers dancing over a handheld scanner. Motion sensors on the roof, but there's a dead zone near the loading dock. Thorne nodded approvingly. In the months since she'd insisted on joining his mission, Kira had proven herself invaluable. Her experience as a captive gave her insights into slave operations that even his military training couldn't provide. More importantly, she had a mind like a steel trap and reflexes that had saved his life twice. "Remember the plan," he said, checking his plasma rifle. "I go in loud, draw their attention. You slip in through the ventilation system and free the prisoners while you handle the guards." She finished. "I know, Thorne. This is our 7th operation together." He studied her face in the dim light. 7 successful raids had transformed more than just her confidence. The haunted look in her violet eyes had been replaced by something fierce and alive. Somewhere along the way, as they'd worked side by side, slept in the same ship, and shared the dangers of their mission, that fierceness had begun to include something else, something that made his pulse quicken whenever she looked at him. "Move," he commanded, and they split up. The raid went according to plan until it didn't. Kira had successfully reached the holding cells and was leading 12 freed slaves toward the exit, when an alarm shrieked through the warehouse. She heard the distinctive whine of plasma fire from the main floor. Too much of it. Thorne was outnumbered. "Get them out," she told the eldest of the freed prisoners, pressing her access codes into his hand. "The ship's in docking bay 7. If we're not there in 20 minutes, leave without us. But go." Kira raced through the corridors, her heart hammering as the sound of battle grew louder. She burst onto the main floor to find Thorne pinned behind an overturned cargo container. Return fire from at least 6 guards, keeping him trapped. Blood streaked his left arm, and his movements were becoming sluggish. She didn't think. She just acted. Her stolen guard rifle barked twice, dropping the 2 flanking guards. Thorne used the distraction to roll to better cover, but Kira was already moving, her smaller size allowing her to dart between the maze of containers. She came up behind the remaining guards like a blue-skinned ghost, her weapon speaking in precise, deadly whispers. When the smoke cleared, Thorne was staring at her with a mixture of amazement and something deeper. "That was incredibly stupid," he said, his voice rough. "That was incredibly necessary," she replied, but her hands were shaking as the adrenaline faded. They made it to the ship with minutes to spare, but during the hyperspace jump to safety, Kira found herself in the small medical bay, breaking down. The violence, the memories it triggered, the fear of losing Thorne, it all crashed over her at once. "Hey," he said softly, appearing in the doorway. "Talk to me. I can't lose you," she whispered, tears streaming down her blue cheeks. "I can't lose someone else I care about." Thorne crossed the room into strides, pulling her into his arms. She felt small against his chest, her pink curls soft against his chin. "You won't lose me," he murmured. "I promise." She pulled back to look at him, and the air between them crackled with unspoken feelings. "Thorne," his lips found hers, cutting off her words. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but when she responded by pressing closer, it deepened into something that spoke of shared dangers, mutual trust, and desires too long suppressed. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted, his forehead resting against hers. "Only weeks?" she asked, a smile tugging at her lips. "Months." "Then, since the day you insisted on staying." His thumb traced her cheek. "You're beautiful, Kira, inside and out, and you're the strongest person I know." She kissed him again, pouring all her gratitude, affection, and growing love into the contact. When they separated, her violet eyes were bright with unshed tears. "We make a good team, the best," he agreed, holding her close as the stars wheeled past their viewport. "But we're not done yet. I got word about something big." The main hub where they processed new captures. Kira's expression hardened. "Where?" "The Kepler Fortress. Same place they held you before the auction." She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "Then that's where we're going. Time to finish what we started. Outside, the cosmos stretched endlessly, but inside the ship, two souls had found something worth fighting for each other, and the freedom of those still trapped in darkness. Redemption hung in the shadow of an asteroid field, its hull cold and dark to avoid detection. Beyond the jagged rocks, the Kepler Fortress loomed like a mechanical cancer against the stars, a massive processing station, where thousands of beings were broken, catalogued, and distributed across the galaxy's black markets. Kira stood at the observation deck, her pale blue skin almost glowing in the starlight as she stared at the fortress. Her pink curls had grown longer during their months together, and now they framed a face that had learned to love again, even as it prepared for war. I was held in Section 7, she said quietly, her voice steadied despite the memories. Third level. They keep the premium merchandise there, young, undamaged, compliant. The last word came out like a curse. Thorne moved behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. No. She turned in his arms, violet eyes fierce with determination. This ends here, tonight. He studied her face in the dim light, seeing the woman who had grown from the broken girl he'd rescued. There's something else. Something I haven't told you about the fortress. Kira's expression grew concerned. What? Thorne's jaw tightened, old pain flickering across his features. The cartel that runs it, the syndicate, they're the ones who took my family, my wife Elena and my daughter Mira. His voice cracked slightly. I've been hunting them for 3 years, Thorne. She reached up to touch his scarred cheek. I'm so sorry. Elena was a teacher. Mira was 7 years old. They were taken during a raid on our colony while I was off-world on a military assignment. His hands tightened on her waist. By the time I got back, they were gone. I tracked them across half the galaxy, but I was always one step behind. Kira's breath caught. The syndicate, they're the ones who captured me too, from my home planet. They stared at each other, the weight of connection and shared tragedy settling between them. It's not a coincidence, Thorne said grimly. They've been operating for years, targeting colonies on the rim. Your world, my world, we're all just resources to them. Then we finish it, Kira said, her voice carrying steel. For Elena and Mira, for my brother who tried to protect me, for everyone they've destroyed. Thorne pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. I love you, Kira. I need you to know that before we go in there. I love you too, she whispered, the words carrying the weight of everything they'd shared, the missions, the dangers, the quiet moments of healing. That's why this matters. We're not just fighting for strangers anymore. We're fighting for us. His kiss was fierce, desperate, as if he were trying to memorize the taste of her. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Come with me, he said, taking her hand and leading her to his quarters. The small cabin was lit only by starlight, but it was enough. Thorne's hands were gentle as he helped her remove her tactical gear, his touch reverent as he traced the faded scars on her shoulders, reminders of her captivity that had slowly healed under his care. You're beautiful, he murmured, his lips following the path of his fingers. So beautiful. Kira's response was to pull him down to her, her pale blue skin luminous in the darkness. Their lovemaking was slow, tender, a celebration of life in the face of the death they would soon confront. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered endearment was a promise that they would fight for each other, that they would survive this together. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the narrow bunk, Kira traced patterns on Thorne's chest with her fingertips. The plan is insane, she said softly. Completely, he agreed, his hand stroking her pink curls. You let yourself be captured, infiltrate from the inside while I attack from without. 1,000 things could go wrong, but it's the only way to reach the processing center and free everyone at once. She looked up at him, her violet eyes serious. I can do this, Thorne. I'm not the same person you rescued. I know. He kissed the top of her head. That's what terrifies me. They made love again as the asteroid field wheeled around them, each moment precious because it might be their last. When dawn's cycle came, they prepared their gear in silence, both understanding that words were inadequate for what lay ahead. At the airlock, Thorne caught her hand. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, she said firmly. We're going to destroy them, free everyone, and then we're going to go home to Haven and help the others we've saved build new lives. Promise me, he said, his gray eyes intense. Promise me you'll come back to me. Kira rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring all her love and determination into the contact. I promise. Now let's go remind the Syndicate why they should fear humans and the people they protect. As her small infiltration pod drifted toward the fortress, Kira felt the familiar coldness of preparation settle over her. But beneath it, warm and constant, was the knowledge that she was no longer alone, that somewhere in the darkness, the man she loved was moving to meet her, and together they would bring this nightmare to an end. The plasma cuffs clicked around Kira's wrists as the Syndicate guards dragged her through the familiar corridors of the Kepler Fortress. Her pale blue skin bore fresh bruises carefully applied by Thorne before her capture to sell the illusion, and her pink curls were matted with synthetic blood. To the guards, she was just another broken captive being returned to processing. Section 7, Level 3, one guard growled to his companion. Boss wants this one prepped for the premium auction tomorrow. Kira kept her eyes downcast, playing the part of the defeated slave while her enhanced earpiece crackled with Thorne's voice. I'm in position at the main power core. 15 minutes until the fireworks start. The guards threw her into a holding cell with 30 other prisoners, beings of various species, all wearing the same expression of hopeless despair. But as the guards walked away, Kira's violet eyes began to burn with purpose. Listen to me, she whispered urgently to her cellmates. My name is Kira. I'm here to get you out, but I need you to trust me. In 10 minutes, the lights are going to go out. When they do, be ready to run. A young Altarian boy no more than 12 looked up at her with wide eyes. Run where? To freedom, she said, producing a small plasma cutter from her boot. I promise. Across the fortress, Thorne moved through the maintenance tunnels like a ghost. 3 years of hunting. The Syndicate had taught him every weakness in their security, every blind spot in their defenses. He reached the power core just as his chronometer hit 0. For Elena, he whispered, thinking of his wife. For Mira, his daughter's face flashed in his mind. For Kira, the explosion that followed lit up the void of space like a newborn star. Emergency lighting flickered on throughout the fortress as primary power died, and in the confusion, Kira struck. The plasma cutter made short work of the cell locks. Move, she shouted, leading the prisoners through corridors she knew by heart from her own captivity. Behind them, she could hear the fortress's automated systems struggling to contain the damage Thorne was causing. They reached the main processing center just as the second wave of explosions rocked the station. A vast chamber held over 400 prisoners in various stages of preparation for auction. Kira's heart clenched as she saw the fear in their eyes, the same fear she'd once carried. The restraint controls are over there, she told the strongest of her rescued group, pointing to a control panel. Free everyone you can. I have something else to finish. At the center of the chamber, on a raised platform, stood Director Varix, the Syndicate leader who had personally overseen her own processing months ago. His reptilian features were twisted with rage as he barked orders to his remaining guards. Find the saboteur, he hissed. Bring me his head. You want a head? Kira called out, stepping into the light. Try mine. Varix's eyes widened as he recognized her. The blue-skinned girl. You were supposed to be sold on Jarek months ago. I was, Kira said, her voice carrying across the chamber. But someone taught me that slavery only works if people accept it. And I'm done accepting anything from you. The director's weapon cleared its holster just as Thorne burst through the main doors, his assault rifle speaking in deadly whispers. Guards fell like wheat before the scythe as he carved a path toward the platform. Kira, he shouted over the chaos. The charges are set. We have 5 minutes. Go, she called back, using her own weapon to cover the escaping prisoners. Get them to the ships. But Varix had other plans. His scaled hand found a control panel, and suddenly the chamber's blast doors began to seal. If I'm dying here, he snarled, I'm taking you all with me. Kira saw the trap closing and made her choice. She sprinted toward the control panel, diving under Varix's return fire. Her fingers flew over the interface, using codes she'd memorized during her captivity. The doors groaned, but continued to close. "It's not working," she shouted. Thorne appeared beside her, his plasma rifle trained on Varrics. "Step away from the controls." "Too late." "Human," the director laughed. "Your precious blue-skinned pet will die with the rest of the—" His words were cut off as Kira's shot took him center mass. As he fell, she grabbed his access key and slammed it into the control panel. The blast doors shuddered to a halt, then began to retract. "Move, move, move," Thorne bellowed, and the last of the prisoners flooded through the opening. They ran together through corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting. Kira's hand tightened Thorne's. Behind them, the fortress was coming apart as his charges detonated in sequence. They reached the docking bay just as the Redemption and a dozen other rescue ships were loading the last of the freed prisoners, cutting it close. Healer Vesa called from the Redemption's ramp. "Everyone's aboard." As their ship pulled away from the dying fortress, Kira watched through the viewport as the massive structure collapsed in on itself. Thousands of beings were free. The Syndicate's main operation was destroyed, and the galaxy was a little bit safer. "No more auctions," she whispered. "No more chains." Thorne agreed, pulling her close. 6 months later, they stood on the observation deck of Heaven's new orbital station, watching ships arrive and depart in the endless rhythm of commerce. But this time, it was legitimate trade. The sanctuary had grown into something larger, a beacon of hope for those fleeing slavery and oppression. "Any regrets?" Thorne asked, his arm around her waist. Kira looked up at him, her violet eyes bright with love and purpose. "Only that it took so long to find you." He kissed her then, long and sweet, while around them the stars wheeled in their ancient dance. They had both lost so much, but in finding each other, they had discovered something worth fighting for, a future where freedom wasn't just a dream, but a right defended by those who refused to let darkness win. In the months that followed, their names became legend among the Rim worlds. The human who wouldn't stay silent, and the blue-skinned woman who refused to be broken. Together, they had done what governments and armies couldn't. They had said no to injustice and made it stick. And in the quiet moments between missions, when they lay together in their shared quarters, they whispered plans for the future, for a galaxy where no one would have to endure what they had endured, where love could grow in the space left behind by ended pain. The war against slavery would continue, but they would face it together. Two souls who had found their way home in each other's arms.